Here's the installation after it's all tightened down, I think. Yeah, I probably will put another nut on here or some sort of lock washer. This is just temporarily stuck on there. Here's the I should probably need a light on this thing, but let's see that rubber hose I put on here, because it goes through this baffle here in the tunnel where it's rubber coated. Well, actually mine isn't rubber coated. I just put a piece of rubber on one side and glued it on there. But there's little holes in it and they're pretty sharp edged, so I put this rubber tube over here so it goes through the tunnel about, maybe that far, and it prevents, hopefully for a while, if any vibration, that it won't cut through the copper tube. That's probably why I would have went with the braided tubing all the way up next time, plus you'd avoid doing all this craziness with the coupling. But most of the time when you do gauges, most of the time it's done with this copper tubing, and that's what they sell, or they have that Teflon tubing that's also used. But a lot of people say that it burns, you can chafe it and burn it easily, so I ordered a bunch of copper, and at the time I never thought of using braided. So also with copper, it fatigues. If you have it on an engine and it's, our engines shake a little bit, after a while I imagine the copper would break. So they recommend putting a circle, like a wound up section of a few inches before a vibration area. And I didn't really want to do that, because that would have been maybe right here where this, let's see, is that it? There it is. Yeah, about right here where you would do like a twist here, the copper tubing, and then insert it. But then you'd always have this copper tubing sticking out here. Anytime you'd have the engine out, you wouldn't have something flexible like this line that I attached. So the reason that I put in this flexible line is just for obviously for making sure the copper doesn't fatigue and break, but also makes the engine, if you take the engine out, that you can get this line out of the way a lot easier than you can a copper line. And don't have to worry about breaking it or crimping the copper line and all that. So that's why I went with this and made this whole thing complex a little bit with that union that I showed in a previous video. So this probably gives a better view of these unions that are kind of unique. This is a male M6 1.5, I think, male thread brass fitting, and the other side is a common pipe thread, 1/8 27, and this is a 1/8 27 T fitting, but it's unusual where it's got one male and two female ends. The females are the typical the 1/8 27 pipe thread, and this is a 1/8 27 male pipe thread. So it's a pretty unusual T fitting, and it's also chromed, where I think the primary use was mostly hot rodders that use them on American hot rod cars, and they needed they also had it chromed, right? So for show cars. But in my case, I just found it useful, because you can't find one of these T fittings with the right metric going into our block, so I had to use this kind of two pieces instead of one. this chrome fitting normally fits into most blocks that have a standard 1/8 pipe fitting, which is more common on American cars anyway. So I had to get this little copper fitting. So that's the story behind the complexity of this thing and why it sticks out so far. But I've even seen it stick out farther than that with more complex fittings. And I tested this out, and it looks like this sensor here works better than the Fiat. Now, I didn't warm up the engine all the way, but it seemed I could not get this thing to glow red on the dash with this type of sensor. This is probably China made, but it's a more universal one, and it has the standard 1/8 27 pipe thread on it. And it might work out better. I'll put more reviews on it. So maybe it could be that the Fiat standard ones, especially when they're old, maybe they're, I don't know what happens to them, the spring gets stronger or weaker or what, but there's something in it that causes the oil pressure light to glow at idle just really easy after they get warmed up. And you know, it's always an alarm or panic when you see that light on. You never know what's going on. So I'm gonna probably figure out how to route this cable and maybe tie it up to, this is the choke and throttle here, so I might already have a wire tie or zip tie there. I might zip them together, something like that. Here's the clutch, and I might, maybe I'll tie it down here with some sort of clamp. I'm not sure, but even leaving it like this is probably okay, because, you know, and this is another area here that if you use copper tubing, that area right there, that might cut through copper tubing. You'd have to use some hose covering or something like that if you ran the copper all the way through. So that's another reason why I use this section in this area, because it's so many sharp edges that you can cut copper or that Teflon tubing. So, you know, there's a lot of details in putting this together that you wouldn't think, you know, as to why, you know, I'm doing all of this, you know, to make all this work, and, you know, why I would do this. But there's some reason to it, you know. So, anyway, let me start probably on the water temperature gauge now and follow up with that a little bit later.